Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to learn how to solve content jumping and content stretching problem. So first of all, what is content jumping and content stretching problem? Before that, let's look at the customization of how we can configure width and height of an element in the web pages. Okay, so we might have already seen this width and height attribute value in image. So last chapter you learned about how to configure the height and width of the images by using the value height and width. The same height and width, that name is applicable for all the elements in the web pages. Okay, so it's like simply you can specify the selector name, so where you want to apply. So for example, here the selector is h1 and then the property is width and the value. Okay, so how much width you want to set for the h1 that particular element. So either you can use pixels or point or EM or percentage. So we are already familiar with 4 different type of units that we can apply for any elements in the web pages. So we can use any of those for 5 units. Okay. So width property will help us to configure the width of any element, and height will help us to configure height of any element. Okay. So only you have to specify what element you want to customize. That should be given as a selector. Okay, so that is width and height property. Now let's look more into that width and height property. So you might have noticed this content jumping and content stretching problem. So the first figure depicts content. It's kind of even it's content stretching, but content jumping is kind of what to say. When you open an image, it will wait for multimedia files to get loaded, whether it is video or image, whatever it is. It will wait for the multimedia images gets loaded, and after the multimedia files got loaded, the position of all the elements in the web pages will get modified. Okay, so that will create kind of content jumping look in the web pages. The elements will change their position after the multimedia file got loaded. So that is called content jumping problem. Sometimes it will be kind of like annoying. We have to look at the CSS property to avoid that kind of content jumping problem. And the content stretching is kind of like creating a horizontal scroll bar. You might vertical scroll bar, we are fine with that, but the horizontal scroll bar, it's kind of little bit annoying to move your horizontal scroll bar to look at the content. So when your content is going beyond the viewport, then automatically horizontal scroll bar will appear. You can see, look at this, the second image that is that actually created the horizontal scroll bar because the width is greater than the viewport width. Okay, so that would create content stretching problem. So how to avoid that content stretching problem? So first let's look at the content jumping problem. To solve this content jumping, that means the multimedia file after the inclusion, then the position of the elements is getting changed. How to solve that? For that, you have to create minimum width property. First, you have to figure out what element is going to create. That it has some size issues. It may be bigger or smaller. You have to first figure out what is the selector that you want to apply, you want to customize to solve this content jumping problem. For example, let's say that this h1 is kind of you have a very small element. Okay, and then let's say there is an image. Okay, there is an image, it is getting loaded, but the size is very smaller. After it gets loaded, the element size is getting, like all the elements is getting stretched because the size of the element is lower than the expected size. Okay, so that would create content jumping. So you can simply say minimum width of that particular element should be this, so that it will not get changed. It will not change the size of the expected display. Okay, so let's look at that. Let's explore it in W3 School website. Okay, so if you click onto that, you'll see, look at this. So this element the span element, you can see they have applied minimum width property. So the actual size of the element is just this, okay, which is some around 200. But it may create, like, if to avoid content jumping problem, you're setting that as 500 pixel, okay. So what happens, this remaining 300 pixel is reserved, okay, the remaining area is reserved only for that particular element, so that it will not move the it is a inline black level element, so it would not create, but normally assume this will affect only for the inline element. So for example, you say there is an inline element like image, okay, and if you set the minimum width of that, then the whole reserved space what you're specifying will be reserved for that particular element. So if the size of that image is 500 pixel or 600 pixel, it will not affect. But if the size of the pixel is 200 pixel, then what would happen? The browser will allocate the whole 500 pixel for that image. Okay, so the remaining element will be free, but it will be reserved only for the image. Okay, so that is the purpose of minimum width property. Okay, whether it is using or not, that particular space will be reserved for that element. This will avoid content jumping problem. Okay. So what is the next thing that we are going to see is content stretching problem. The same kind of same time, like how to solve with the width problems. So if the content is larger than the maximum width, then automatically the width will be set to this maximum width given. Okay. So if it is below, then nothing will happen. But if the element the width of the element is going beyond the given element, then it will just set this as its threshold, okay, maximum value. So let's explore it in W3 School website. You can see that this is the actual size of the paragraph, okay. When you say that the paragraph should be only 150 pixels of width, the maximum width of the paragraph should be 150, then what will happen? It will just set it to 150 pixels. It will just minimize the size. Okay. So if the size of the element is below 150 pixels, then nothing will happen. But when it goes beyond 150 pixels, like given in the above paragraph, then what would happen? It will just minimize the size and set the threshold as 150 pixels. So this will, like, normally when you apply it, you will be applying it only for the elements which goes beyond the viewport width. Okay, so automatically it will just reduce it and it will just keep it within the viewport content or any other content, whatever container you are specifying, it will keep it inside the container. Okay, so that is maximum width property. And I have just added one more width property which could be useful, maximum height property. Okay, so you can see like exactly like maximum width, maximum height property will help you to set the threshold for the maximum height. You can see the first paragraph is the actual size. When you set the maximum height property here, what will happen? It will just create a container like a scroll bar, and it will just keep this height as 50 pixel. When it goes beyond the 50 pixel, then automatically the scroll bar will be created. However, it just tries to keep the content to the specified width. Okay, so it will not go beyond the specified width when you say maximum width and maximum height. When you say minimum width, then what will happen? It will not go below the given threshold value. Okay, so this maximum width, minimum width, maximum height problem will solve the content jumping and content stretching. So next video we are going to see box model.